Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you all so much for coming to this evening's Third on Third. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Jared, and I'm the curator here at the Amelia Island Museum of History. Now, before we get started today, I would like to ask everyone to either turn off or silence their cell phones so we can avoid any interruptions while our speaker is presenting. Now, before I do turn it over to our speaker tonight, I have a few quick announcements about upcoming programs and events happening at the museum. Next month's Brown Bag Lunch will be presented by Wes Hinton, the Vice President of Wildlife. He'll be providing an overview of wildlife, its goals, its histories, its current status, and its plans for the future, as well as answering questions from the community. This will be a great opportunity to hear about what is happening on the mainland and to ask questions about the developments that will influence the entirety of our Nassau County community. You won't want to miss this, so make sure to see Wes Hinton when he comes November 1st at noon. Next month's Third on Third will be presented by Dr. George Aaron Broadwell, a leading linguist in the study of the Timucuan language and its historic dialects. Dr. Broadwell is also the creator of the online Timucua English Dictionary and will be speaking to us about his research, as well as how the Timucua language reflects their culture and their ways of life. Dr. Broadwell will be joining us on the evening of November 17th, so mark your calendars now. Now, finally, I have the honor of introducing our speaker for this evening. Sarah Miller is the Regional Director for the Northeast and East Central Centers of the Florida Public Archaeology Network. She received her master's degree in anthropology from Eastern Carolina University, where she developed archaeology education programs at Tryon Palace in New Bern, North Carolina. Ms. Miller supervised field and lab projects for the Kentucky Archaeological Survey and currently serves on the board of directors for the Society of Historical Archaeology, chairing the Society's Heritage at Risk community. Her specialties include historical archaeology, archaeology education, site stewardship, heritage at risk, advocacy, and, as we'll hear shortly, historic cemeteries. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Sarah Miller.
Good to be here. It's been a while since I've been in the before COVID time, the after COVID. I'm here in the after COVID time, so I'm excited to get reacquainted with the museum, and I hope to not be as a stranger as I have been. I see you guys back there, and it's nice to see you. So I just want to make sure everyone's in the right place. Like you saw the headline, because this will not be a presentation on Dire Straits. I know a little about Knopfler, and I've had their music going through my head all day as I was working on the presentation. So even though the situation is dire, in between those, we're not going to be doing Dire Straits. And related to that, we are not going to be doing Islands in the Stream either. It's similar to Dire Straits, but just a little different. So I want you to know, if you haven't met me before, I work for the Florida Public Archaeology Network, and we're a group that exists in a nutshell to help protect the state's varied past through education outreach, helping local governments, and helping the state's division of historic resources. So when I started in this job, and here's my first mention of it, 17 years ago, I think Fernandina and Nassau County was very important to us starting getting our foothold in what we were going to do, and was also a really willing laboratory for some of our new outreach programs that we developed that you'll hear about in the presentation. Excellent, glad that you are here. And that's us in a nutshell. I have 15 counties that I serve, so I used to have 7. So if you don't see me as much, that's because I have to go all the way down to Okeechobee sometime. And very appropriate, I have a land acknowledgement just to honor the ancestors who have lived and worked on this land for thousands of years, and also the Bela Geechee community and their descendants who have been here for hundreds of years, and we are on their land today and going to speak on some of their sites as well. So I gave you kind of a joking start to Dire Straits, but what's the definition? Because when Jarrett contacted me about a presentation, I thought, oh, this will sound great, Dire Straits, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, oh, yeah, I should maybe pause and remember what that is. Any ideas? What does Dire Straits call up for you?
Bad shape.
Bad shape, what did you say?
I didn't, but I'm going to say American Beach is disappearing for our community.
places that are
Yeah,
eroding away.
well, it's become gentrified, multi-million-dollar homes.
Yeah, getting pushed out, so that's a dire straits in another way too, that it's
Yes.
not just environmental.
Yeah.
Dire Straits is impending danger
Doom.
to
Something
yes,
bad is
Yes.
coming our way.
dire.
And then what for cemeteries? A state of extreme distress. And now applying that to cemeteries, I just kind of want to get an idea of the information you're already coming with tonight, of what you know about the situation of cemeteries. So let's see if you can nail some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight.
Part of the last fellow is like descending,
Okay.
it's washing away.
So some of that erosion and sea level rise and marsh migration may be there.
Developers are worse. You know, I mean, if there's cemeteries that are now covered over by, you know, parking lots.
Get her a glass of wine. That's fantastic. You can't drive in as I did today through Lee and just look left and look right and
Oh,
think,
yeah.
oh my gosh, because I see that landscape different too. That's
Also the big trees and the roots they throw out and how they break up gravestones and.
yeah, like an intrusion of things like that, or gopher tortoises, or you know, maybe natural things that are there, but intruding as well on the cemetery. Well, what I'm going to do is first cover some threats, and then I'm going to cover one of the silent threats of cemeteries you might not have thought of. It didn't come up yet, though it's like related to just about everything you guys said, and then leave you with a couple ideas of what you can do, because even though we're in dire straits, we're together and we're listening about this topic tonight. It shows you're interested, and I have great hope that we can maybe change the course of some of what we're doing.
Does cemeteries include columbariums in your definition?
I think they do. You know, we had a case in St. Augustine where a columbarium was vandalized, and the cost of damage that was criminally charged was equal to that of vandalizing a burial for each one in the columbarium. So I would say so.
Wow.
All right. Well, thanks to Dina Pulver, who works for USA Today, I have redone the first part of this talk with her stunning slides, and some of them are by her cohort, Judy Blair Berry, because I think she captures what I've been trying to say for a long time about cemeteries and danger, especially from environmental threats, because not everyone is there after a storm and going through, or too often we see the results of it, but not as it's happening. So that's a casket, and you can see it like tucked in there, and that bluff that is starting to come down. Now, we don't have bluffs that high, but that is certainly the condition of some of our cemeteries in Florida, that they are eroding out of our banks. This is maybe not rare to you, but seeing them flooded, and this can be flooded due to sunny day flooding now we have, plus inundation of rain, those huge 500-year floods that keep happening every few years now, with increasing intensity. And something I don't think about much, but there are burials that are submerged, so you think, oh, well, they're fine, they're already underwater. But some of the ones that are still intact underwater were because of a rapid inundation. Like, think of dam projects where they would flood like a whole area. The burials are actually still intact, but as droughts and scientific word aridification is happening, these waters are going lower and away. And I went up to Lake Mead last year to see 70 feet of that lake has dropped down and exposing a lot of things that were never meant to be slowly inundated and exposed, but well, probably never meant to be rapidly covered over either. But there are cemeteries, and this one you can see is in the Dry Tortugas that are in Florida that are already submerged, or often we hear about obelisks or headstones that are already in the river. So I just wanted them to be represented.
I have a question.
The challenge is more than that. I will take a question.
What are your parameters or a definition or parameters of what encompasses a cemetery? Would it be 2 graves, 10 graves, a community-oriented one?
Because I like you, I'm going to take a question right now And then later, I'll go through them. You can think of them as I'm going. I always say a cemetery is not about individuals, but populations. And sometimes we find like a tooth or a bone, and I have to remember, oh yeah, people lost things like their teeth, and just because you find a human bone in an isolated place doesn't mean you've necessarily even found a burial. But anywhere a human has passed away and their remains are put into the ground, that's a burial. And it can be 1, it could be 5, it could be a dog and a dog burial. It could be, you know, one mass pit with thousands of people. It could be, you know, a whole bunch scattered across the whole landscape. But I do like people to start thinking of cemeteries as populations, because some of what I'm going to talk about are not specific cemeteries tonight, but looking at really broad cemetery patterns that make up the whole, like, in Florida. All right. This is one of those that is falling into the river. This is Switzerland Cemetery. It's on the St. Johns River, and we're getting an early highlight of my other pet peeve is that this boundary is not drawn correctly. The cemetery goes all the way to the water. And what the people who manage Switzerland Cemetery have already figured out is that it's eroding rapidly into the river. They've started moving the burials closer to, I think that's Highway 13. So they've taken the furthest row out, moving it more towards where there's terra firma. Good idea for the burial, but now that disturbed strata is gonna go even faster. So I applaud their efforts to try and do that, but it's also one of those cemeteries we keep an eye on, because you're not gonna lose an inch a day. You're gonna probably lose rapid parts of it. When we first got started with looking at sea level rise impacts, because that's what you could say 10 years ago, it was around this very building that I took the turn into, oh my God, what's going to happen with the climate crisis? Is Adrienne Burke. She was with the nodding heads with the preservation, and she called about Los Fellows Cemetery and what you had mentioned, that they are starting to have, well, they were recognizing in their long-term management plan, oh, there's going to be parts of it that are inundated. So I asked the site file, I'm going to talk about the site file a bit tonight, but could you help illustrate for me how many sites are in danger from something like sea level rise? So we now know this is not a very great graphic to use, because it's what's called a bathtub model. It means, oh, we're just going to raise the water, you know, 1 meter, 3 feet, and then 6 feet for 2 meters. Whereas water doesn't quite work that way. It goes gradually, and whole pine flat areas can fill up really quickly. So this is a rough idea, though, of how many sites we needed to start keeping an eye on. And you'll see for archaeological sites, it's about 3,000 for the 1 meter, and then about 4,000 for the 2 meter. If you wanted to know what it looks like to see most of the cemeteries in Florida, this is a good graphic to think about. But these are about 1,600 dots, and the real number is probably closer to 8,000, if not more. The more I work with my colleagues in Kentucky and South Carolina, North Carolina, there are hundreds of cemeteries in a small amount of area. So I think that we're like, great, we have these dots and we know what we're managing. We don't really know. These are the ones that are at least recorded with the site file and how they're distributed. And I'm always skeptical. Blank areas, you know, anywhere people lived in Florida, they died in Florida. So I'm skeptical when I see those gaps. Yeah. So one thing that many people in this room have even participated in are cemetery resource protection training workshops. Yay! CRIP. And I started these, I came from Kentucky where I did a lot of burial removal, and I took it as a very sacred honor that I got to be selected to help transition these remains to where they needed to be. But after hundreds and thousands, I thought, let's just never do that again. And what can I do to commit myself to keeping cemeteries in place? So our crypt workshop, just a little, I think this is the old presentation. Da, 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 da.
This was the last one that you sent me.
Yeah. Here. I got it.
Okay.
Oh, shh. You're not supposed to see it yet. Sorry, I reshuffled the slides in a particular way that would build and you would be carried along in this. But Crypt's a good place. I can describe that without a slide. We have a morning session where there are 4 presentations. We talk about managing historic cemeteries, how to list a cemetery on the Florida Master Site File. We talk about how to, what are the laws? And don't worry, if you've taken Crypt before, we have jazzed that section up into some case studies, so it's a little more exciting to see now. Is this a new one?
Yes, ma'am.
Excellent. And then in the afternoon, we go to a local cemetery. We've gone to Bosfellow. I think we've gone to, is it St. John's?
St. Peter's.
St. Peter's. And a few more in Nassau County, in the Hilliard area. And so that's very fine. I think people enjoy crypts because it gives them something to do right away. And our initial hope was that everyone could fill out a Florida Master Site File, helping record where cemeteries are. That was okay, but now we really encourage people to help us monitor cemeteries. So now we've had over 100 workshops done in Florida in like 40 or so different counties, many different communities, and we've had 4 conferences. So our 5th conference is coming up in Archer, outside of Gainesville. Is this the new one?
This is the one that was on the flash drive.
Okay. No, it's the same. It's the same, people. What am I gonna do? All right, we'll be all right. We'll be all right. We'll champion on. What you would have seen was an article showing some of the building blocks of Crypt, and then just some other stats about data gaps. So they might pop up later in the presentation. But data gaps are important for a couple reasons. And to me, that's one of the silent issues related to why is it creeping out on me? Is it Halloween? Is it Halloween? So the data gaps are a problem because as I showed you with the pictures with all the dots, there are about 1,600 cemeteries that are listed on the Florida Master Site File. That's the state's official inventory of cemeteries. Wow, it is really persistent.
Do they do family cemeteries?
They do all cemeteries.
Okay.
And I also wanted to honor the work that has been done by the Amelia Island Historic Society because I know one of the reports that's referred back to often is a cemetery survey that was done by the Historic Society. There's a big problem though in Nassau County. It keeps cutting out. Sorry, Rep Jenkins. Click through. Okay, indeed, I see what's happened. So this is us doing a crypt in Cosmo. Not long ago, this is the first one. We had to hold it for years because of COVID. So we promised that would be the first one. So we are really excited to be back with the community and talking about cemeteries. And this is us in the afternoon going out and cleaning some of the headstones. And sometimes we do workshops and no one knows anyone in the cemetery. This workshop, everyone had loved ones and kin and very close friends and relations, so it was a very personal day to be out in the field with them. Other ways to get involved, let me see if that's what's happening here. Oh no, these are definitely the, yeah. Are you sure? That's the one that's on there.
Sarah, I think you should go look for your slides.
Yeah, they're in the car, but
No, I mean on your flash drive.
on the flash drive, that's the one that's on there.
Yeah, I can download it again if you'd like me
Oh,
to.
I just tried to build it a little different so that you could see the scale of what you can participate in. So maybe let me go back to that thread and we'll just ignore what's in the background for a little bit. One thing you can do is fill out, the state of Florida has a cemetery form that you can fill out. And it's supposed to be a postcard that I can hand out to everyone, and you can self-report in cemeteries, because the state doesn't know where all the cemeteries are. Even the Division of Cemeteries in Tallahassee, that is not historic managed, it's more like in consumerism, but they know the number is closer to 8,000. So we have these ginormous data gaps, and when planners, when elected officials, people making decisions about what are the landscape changes that are going to be made, they look at things like the Florida Master Site File. They look at these planning documents. But I just want you to know, I'm very scared for Nassau County because they are not often mapped in the right place, if they are mapped at all. So we noticed a couple years ago,
Here it is.
Yay! Thank you for your persistence. So if you didn't know what the Florida Master Site File is, here's a little more information, because I refer to it a lot and take it for granted. But the site file is maintained in Tallahassee by the Division of Historic Resources. No, I'm not in charge of it. No, I cannot put the dots away for you. Chip Birdsong is the site file master, but it includes archaeological sites, historic structures, cemeteries, bridges, shipwrecks, districts. So, and it's not a register. Something on the National Register has been evaluated for its significance. This is an inventory. Anyone in this room can add a site that they know about to the Florida Master Site File. I'll tell you, I think it's difficult to navigate the forms and know what you're doing at first, so we try and help with that. But it's an inventory, just so we can say how many cemeteries are there. So it's flawed, but it's the best that we have. Okay, there, now all the cemeteries. Ooh, we're building. Oh, yeah. So you can see they're in danger from sea level rise, but also we had Kevin Gadisco a couple years ago. I'm like, I feel like this is not really the measure of cemeteries that are at risk. So he looked at like 11 different factors, from storm surges to development to major roadway expansions that were planned, and he made this map of the ones that were currently recorded, which is a huge disclaimer, because I've already told you we only have like 1/8 of the cemeteries in the site file and what's happening. And what do you see in Nassau County? Are you surprised by this image?
So Nassau County and Apalachicola are like the big, you know, is that Tallahassee or Apalachicola?
I think that's like Wakulla County that's up in there.
Over in the Panhandle.
Yeah, but for you guys, storm surge. Do you know your storm surge is higher than like anywhere else in Florida if you look at the storm surge zones? And on the Atlantic seaboard, sea level is rising 20% faster here than in the global average. So if you ever feel like, oh, I have to go somewhere to see cemeteries that are threatened, you don't. You can just, you know, be around here. So I'm really grateful to talk to you today here in Nassau County, because I think you need to hear this more than most people living in Florida of what the dire conditions are. So there's my nicer slide on data gaps. And the number has changed a little bit, but not by much. I think we've added like 300 since 2015. And here's the thing that gets me, Find a Grave. Find a Grave has 4,000. So if we could crowdsource some of this information, because people who are consultants or are looking at these documents for planning, they don't have to look at Find a Grave. They have to look at the Florida Master Site File. So that's the value in getting them listed on the site file. And that's the number one thing you can do to make a cemetery safer. And if the data gaps are still like just trickling through a little bit, this is an old table, but I wanted to know, are we having a difference in doing our crypt workshops? So I looked at how many cemeteries were recorded before we were doing crypts, and then how many were recorded after. And this in Volusia was done by one person. She went out and recorded 44 cemeteries and blew them through the roof. So that was like the first year. So what I really need to do in my free time is update this, and you'll see hundreds added, but not thousands where it should be. These are some headlines, so you know this is not just a a local issue. I think we're all coming to terms with what it means that not only are these cemeteries in danger, but the pattern are African American cemeteries. And have they been abandoned? Hell no, they're erased. The access to them over time has been depleted or obfuscated on purpose. So the proper term is abandoned. And if you want to go learn more about that right now, I think there's an exhibit at USF, What Lies Beneath, and a really powerful telling of what's been happening in Tampa. You might have heard about the Mount Zion Cemetery, and almost every day I feel like there's another just tragic headline about another cemetery found. So I got to go and stand up for one of the original burial bills, and I was asked, like, well, you know, who forgot it? How did people negligently build on top of it? And, you know, I want to say, like, yeah, of course. But, you know, I always say it's not a 50-year problem, it's not a 100-year problem. Like, this is a 500-year problem of how we think about people and how we think about access to space and how we treat one another fair and equally. So I think a lot of that stems from just total erasure of neighborhoods, and that's not my idea. It is from other people who have written about it and help us to understand why these cemeteries keep on popping up. You know, they're not popping up, they have been there the whole time. I had someone last week, I told Rep. Jenkins about this, he was so mad there was a cemetery on his property, so he called me and he said, well, who put that there? Did you put that there? And I said, no. Like, the church, the community, you know, somebody died and they're buried there. It's not like I went and put a sign that says cemetery. So some really great press for some really hard work that's been done in this community, for the Gullah Geechee that have been saving a lot of sites. This is another one on 60 Minutes in Clearwater, Florida. So we're like at an apex of national news, taking a look at these. Eastport, we've heard a little bit more what happened to that, and Jacksonville, but I get asked all the time what happened, but it's still in process. They're still working out, you know, how that cemetery was forgotten and what they've been able to find from the remains. And then here is your, okay, now things we can do. Number one, you can fill out a historic cemetery inventory postcard, and there's a website. If you go to fpan.us, Google Sarah Miller, archaeologist. You should hopefully find FPAN. But we have a projects page, and that's one of the projects. And we have cemeteries recorded by this postcard here in Nassau County. So they do get listened to and inventory. Oh, there is my article on crypt. So if you'd like to learn more about that, I can send you the article that talks about the building blocks. And oh, we're in a loop. We're in a loop, but we're going the right direction. And the main part of crypt is really building to a management plan for communities who don't have one for their cemeteries. Because how many times a year right now do you see cleanups in cemeteries? Okay, maybe I'm a particular person looking for cemetery information, but there's so many cleanups. Oh, we got one. All right, thank you. There's so many cleanups that happen right now, which is great. I love a cemetery is safer just for people being in it. But if you don't have a master plan of what you're doing, you know Florida, vegetation is just going to grow right back. So it might be better if those people came together for a day and sat down and did what this community did, is some hard work to figure out, what do you want it to look like? What are all the trees? How do we recognize a memorial tree versus a squirrel tree? How do we, you know, go forward with the archival information? So another thing you can do besides attending a crypt workshop is we call it site stewardship, doing monitoring of cemeteries. And that's a little easier than going out and recording a whole new one. Because we'll give you the information about a cemetery and a location, and going out and confirming the location is so important, because as I told you earlier, there's like 10% of your cemeteries that we've been able to find are in the right place. And probably fewer of them are the right shape. So having someone go out and look at it, and I'm featuring here today Chris Nolan. She's our super scout. She likes to say she is the heritage monitoring scout, but she's gone out. She started in 2017 and she just got bit by the bug so strongly that now she's monitored 413 cemeteries in a very short amount of time. She has reported back 382, and that's actually not accurate because in May we sent her specifically to Nassau County to help us. So I have some of the stats of what she's been able to do, and she's recorded 205 that weren't on the site file before. She lives in New Mexico. She doesn't even live in Florida anymore, and she is just that determined, and we are so grateful because I've got to do wonderful things like come up and talk to you guys while she's still working on her reports. We also had last year, another thing you can do are participate in advocacy efforts for cemeteries. Last year was a really important year. We had the Abandoned and Historic Cemetery Bill come forward, and supporting that, I'd say it was pretty bipartisan, went through fairly quickly on its second time, and what the bill did was allowed for funding for a position for someone at the state to kind of have their finger on the pulse of what's happening, especially with African American burials. Is that going to solve everything? No, but at least we'll have a person that we can start focusing messaging through. Also supposed to help for education and supposed to help for grants and help to fix some of the loopholes that currently exist in our laws that make one cemetery protected and then oddly the one next to it not protected. And some states have much more generous cemetery laws that are more fair to descendants and to rights. I was in Kentucky. You can go to any cemetery in Kentucky. There's a easement, a right of access that was just put in by the Attorney General is how they got it done rather than legislation. But you can go to any cemetery. And here I have Representative Glenda Simmons Jenkins of the Gullah Geechee Nation. This is another way you can participate is not just supporting legislation, but stepping up and talking in county meetings, in the press, and reaching out to people to see what they know and try and network people together. This was the site, I think it's now Publix. So where the Publix went up, and this was during COVID, and I'm really honored that she invited me to come up and see what was happening next to Harper Chapel, which would have had and did have a cemetery surrounding it. You know, the thing that really haunts me about this project is someone was working on a preservation plan for what would happen with the cemetery and to acknowledge and honor descendants and those in the community, but they never shared the plan back with the community, nor did it get listed on the site file until we put it on there. So that is, that just can't happen anymore. That can't happen anymore. So kudos to the work that has been done, especially in Nassau County, because these sites are becoming so rare. Oh, what? I didn't say it.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Low country living at its finest, as they say.
Yes, hearing your next month's speaker is like, oh, maybe we should have gone in reverse. So what organically started happening for Nassau County was this idea of a Nassau County cemetery recording project, and in partnership with the Gullah Geechee, a Gullah Geechee historic cemetery recording project. And at the very beginning was the idea that, okay, we definitely want this to be a long-term partnership. We are not in it for we did a project and we left. Like, I could do this till I retire and train my children and my children's children and their children to do this work, and it would never stop. So I'm working on my kids to go get their masters in anthropology so they can continue. But so far they're into forensics and gaming. So, if we can figure that out, we'll have cracked it. But I'm talking a long-term partnership, recognizing this is not a problem that happened last year. The depth of the problem must at least be the depth of the solution. Looking at sea level rise, erosion, development, what are the hot spots? If we can get to one site that's in danger rather than 10 that are not, we need to get to that one, and we need to know what those are. And also sites that are unidentified and then tricky mapped in the wrong place. And this is worse. This is worse than a site not even mapped because then you're going off of inaccurate data. So I have a couple examples, but just to share, it was probably like a project in organically growing 2019, 2020, like 2021, we actually had a file to know what we were going after. In 2022, we found, and I included this in a letter to the county and to the county planner at the time, just to notify them of the 70 recorded cemeteries. So far, we had only verified location for 6, and 13 are on, that purple layered map versus what's on the Florida Master Site File. So 13 that are on one layer are not on the inventory that the state has. 36 we found are already not in the right shape, or not in the right place, or are in the right shape, and there were 13 more that we needed to get information to make a determination. So that was back in 2022, and as you have pointed out, and I described as I drove in, this is a place with a lot of ground disturbing activity happening. So I think the significance and urgency of figuring out where these locations are. This is one, this is Elmore Wild, and I like to talk about it because here is where it's mapped on the site file. And I know a couple problems already just looking at it on the site file. One, it's square. That is kind of tells me, oh, it's a vicinity of. They didn't know the exact area, it's vicinity of. And I'll tell you, in the Nassau County, the Amelia Island Historic Society description, they got it right. They had it right. But it gets turned in another report and it gets mapped in the wrong place, and it's really over here. How can I say that? Because I've been there. I have walked around it and trying to convince people, like, no, it's here. It's not there. How do you know it's not there? I'm like, because it's here. Like, it just is. It's another like, well, why'd you put it there? No, it's there. So we're getting this one straightened out and getting it listed. And thank you to the descendants and members who brought me to that site that day, because it's a difficult site to find and to get access to. So I'm really grateful. Then what is this? Do I just remove the square? Probably, but what if somebody reported a cemetery there? So I can't take it off. I feel like that scene in Princess Bride. So I can't take it off because if I do, there could be a cemetery there. Here's another one just to show you. There's no pattern, which is what alarms us. It's not like, oh, everything just needs to move over here, or oh, they were using the wrong coordinate system. This is Kirkland Cemetery. Here's a recorded location. Wow, that's a big, crazy cemetery going across that road there. Pretty large. It's not there. It's actually a pinpoint here, and Chris was able to find it and talk to the owners, and it's on their private land, and it's well protected. So I'm glad for that information, because who knows what is up there. It probably is not there, but I don't feel good about moving things when I don't know and I can't say that there's nothing there. So that gives you a little flavor of what's happening in your own county. And St. Peter's Church, we had to, because even on the satellite, on top of being there, you know there are extra burials, but this is what was on the site file. And Boss Bellow, people who were in the original workshop know this. I thought, oh, I'll print out the Boss Bellow sheet. Oh no, I'm going wrong. I can tell. Oh, not too bad. We'll get to questions. We'll just get to questions soon. Boss Bellow, when we had the first workshop here, and we wanted to print out an example, because we did 2 workshops the first year, like back in 2012, 2013, in Amelia Island. And we thought, okay, Boss Bellow, we'll use that, and we'll print out the example. Well, some of you might still have that binder that has Boss Bellow, and I flipped to it to use it as an example. I was like, this is an archaic shell midden. So somebody recorded like a 6,000-year-old shell heap, and they probably thought, what should I call it? Oh, I'm near the cemetery. I'll call it Boss Bellow Cemetery. So for years, there was not a cemetery form for like one of the most historic and admired cemeteries in the state. So you just never want to leave it to chance what's in that side file and not. And then if there's a cemetery that you care about, your family cemetery in your community, these are not protected as other files are from Freedom of Information Act, so we can send you the cemetery file and let you see it. So as of July, because it takes a long time to run our numbers, so now we have found 11 of the 70 mapped in the right place. We have ground truth 35 of the ones that we knew were in the wrong place, just looking by maps and different data sets, and we still have 7 to go, and 12 need more information, such as a site visit, and some of those are ones that are like duplicated. What happened? Do we list another one? Do we not? So this is just in Nassau County, one of Florida's many counties, but I do think the urgency is real, given the development, given what I've told you about the environmental issues and the storm surge, and especially because they're not in the place where the people who you want to make informed decisions are able to exercise that ability, because they're looking at things that just are not true. So we were all deeply impacted by the murder of George Floyd, and our discipline as archaeologists also took it not just personally inside what were we going to do in a transformative moment, what could we as archaeologists, and I think we have a special ways that we can help. And one thing that has come to light in the last few years is that it's not diversity, equity, inclusion. You have to have the justice. There has to be a change. And what I've noticed is this work is getting harder. But I think that's a good sign that we're on the right track. That and it's, for me, it is a justice issue. It's a human rights issue. It's a right to burial. It's a right for honoring the ancestors. Similar to that, we very much support the Seminole Tribe of Florida's No More Stolen Ancestors movement. This relates to NAGPRA, the North American Grave Repatriation Act. Say it with me. But that there should not be their ancestors and their remains held in museums, nor their funerary objects. You might have seen in the press over the summer, there was a report out on a museum's failure to return Native American human remains, and they had a big map by state and like a big wake-up call, because this bill, this act is now, I think, 30 years old. It hit 30. So what has actually been done in trying to remove remains from museums? I have one more point about that, but I can't. Oh, next week, the Southeastern Archaeological Conference is happening. I'll be there giving paper, a couple of things. Friday morning, the fireworks are going to hit, because they have a new publication guidelines that says you can no longer, you can't have pictures of human remains in the journal. You cannot have, without the descendants' permission. You cannot have grave goods photoed in the journal without descendants' permission. And like the scientific community, you know how you know when like your discipline is just like hit the fan is when science.org covers you. So in Science Journal, they're like, look at the archaeologists like losing their minds. But I'm very much on the side of the changes in the policy, and get your wine drawers, headed up, or your artists, because it is taboo for many cultures, and I know I wouldn't want my ancestors in that point. So we'll hear more at the end of next week, and if you hear there's a big fisticuffs in Chattanooga, that's because people could just not get in alignment. So just wanting to say that it's more than just a heritage issue, that it is a cycle of environmental justice, social justice, and the human rights concern that is happening here in Nassau County and others. We were able to collaborate and participate on a new research pipeline that goes through modeling and monitoring, meeting with the community, trying to figure out the methods that could be used to help save some sites, and then to do some adaptation mitigation, which we didn't quite get to because not all the parties agreed on the path forward. So I feel like I wanted you to know that archaeologists are in this stage of collaboration, and I wanted you to know it's very difficult. It's difficult. Some of the sites we want to study, now we can't study for 10 miles around it, and we need to respect that and understand, and then focus our efforts. Like, maybe that's okay. We don't need to study that. Maybe we should go to this thing that's about to fall into the river and have a greater impact. So I just wanted to leave you this Crypt Alliance page, and some of you may already be members. It's on Facebook. It's for the graduates of Crypt, and a couple hundred people on there now. And you can click, and a lot of the rip from the headlines I included in my presentation came from current events that Crypt alumni will post also. So I gotta knock them sideways a bit. There's a lot of cleanups using a lot of fun Halloween things, but I need them to remember about cemeteries, the intersection of cemeteries and heritage and preservation. Well, thank you for coming out tonight on the Third on Third, and oh, good. 1 and 2, and then 3. Wow.
I was out at Crane Island a couple of years ago when it first started and was developed, and there was a big discussion nearby the rec center or the pool that was going to be there, that there was a report that there was a burial site in that area, just, let's see, I'm going north, south of the, the rec center with the pool. And I was wondering if you knew anything about it, or if anything had been done about it. Just Peggy, I don't know. But I was going down there, and there were people crawling through the brush and trying to locate the site. And I didn't know whether it had to do with Anna Kingsley's family or with the plantation or the work or some of the relatives. But I don't know, because it's locked and I don't live there, of course, so I can't get in. But
I don't know. I mean, we respond to a lot of things that we don't always know what people think they are later too.
Okay.
Like, I know we've responded up here to fallout shelters, and Emily Jane came to, like, the pool sounds familiar, but if anyone else has knowledge of what that specific thing is, Emily Jane actually lives in Callahan. She's redoing her father's fence right now, so we could go just drive over there and ask her and be like, hey, what's up with that pool? So I don't know, but how about if I find out, I'll let Jarrett know, and he can get back to you. Yeah.
Yes, we talk about cemeteries, which are primarily a European invention. How do we handle the indigenous people who lived here? When you find there's mass graves, are they cemeteries, or how do you?
I mean, any burial site is a cemetery.
It's a burial
And
site, so you consider that a cemetery?
the oldest cemetery that I know of and have evidence for is 8,000 years old. And that's at the Windover Pond, where they uncovered half the pond. Not only, and then there's a second one now off Minnesota Key that I think is about 7,000 years old. What you need to understand is these are not mass burial piles. Those were bundle burials in the water, and then they had wooden sticks that stuck out of the water. And we don't see that now, we just see the water, but it would have been just like headstones on the surface of, oh, I'm getting goosebumps right now. It would have been, marking the dead over the water in a visual way you could have seen. It would have looked like, National Cemetery, or maybe not the amount of Arlington, but some of them were that precise and structured. So I would say the cemeteries of people go back to as soon as there were people. And then,
So you consider them cemeteries?
yeah, I mean, intentional burial. The only thing that's a little confusing to me, it's still a human burial site. But if, like, someone actually trips and falls down and is dead on the ground somewhere for a long time. Because to me, I guess I've never seen an academic definition like this, but to me, it's as much about the people left above the ground as those who are in the ground. So it's like it's an exchange that you see at burial sites and cemeteries where there's the meaning is, a cultural process. There's a way they were dealing with mourning and a cultural way that they practiced and did things. So I just got back from Europe, and there were sites, thousands and thousands of years old. But I don't want you to discount what we have in our Florida. I'm going on a side tangent, hold on. But I went to the museum in Ireland, and they're very excited about the bog bodies. I am too. And I'm excited to be in Ireland and places that they think are so much older than our history. We kicked their butts in history, like to say, because like 6,000 years ago, they had an ice age scrape everything off the top. You know, we have 12,000-year-old sites we have 18,000-year-old sites in Florida. You know, our history, our heritage as a group living on the same people, that goes back really far.
That's because we only count when Europeans came to Florida.
Right.
You know?
And that's
I mean,
reflected
indigenous
in your map.
people everywhere, you know, are
Yeah.
really not.
And that's part of our needing to decolonize our practice and
Yes.
understand. You know, I had a good conversation with my friend Marcy. I'm like, wow, I really want to decolonize my practice. How do I do that? I'm like, oh, didn't even asking the question that way. It's like, it's got a long way to go. But I think being able to go back through and honor Indigenous history and be so proud. I don't know if we're often, like in that day, I went to the docents in the museum. I said, did you know we have mock burials in Florida? They're like, no, you don't. I'm like, no, we do. We have Windover Pond, Mortuary Pond, and anaerobic environment and all that. And ours are older. Like, I don't mean to like belittle your cool stuff going on here, but like, oh, but they didn't have artifacts. And I'm like, no, we have their brains, we have textiles, we have their shoes, we have all these things that we know about. So, okay, there's my tangent, gone far over. But I do think we've tapped on what is an egregious error of people when they think of the history of Florida to start it where they do, because it should be much, much, much further back. Okay, yes, Jennifer.
When we were at the Boston Bellow,
Yeah.
which by the way has just recently been sort of fenced in, there's an area there that is woodland. But all the talk has been over the years that we've been there, that there are probably some black graves there. And we just don't know. It's just woodland, and it's sort of there are sort of undulating little areas and things have grown up, and it's
I would just
I
say,
just wonder if you've ever heard about that, or if
I
there's
have,
any
and
suspicion
I
about
think
it.
we just need to be cautious, especially at Bosbella, of maybe multiple areas where there are African American remains that we don't know about. And part of the landscape that I see when it's torn up, I've been learning from local community members too about the turpentine industry, about the railroad industry, and it's really changed my whole perspective when I'm in a turpentine area and now I see a cat face. I'm like, I'm at a sacred site. It used to be like, oh, look for the hurdy cups and this industry that we don't practice anymore. But people lived on that land to do that work. They lived there. I'm sure they died there. And so these sweeping landscapes. So for Bosbello, I think it would be very good to continue investigating further, listening.
Of course, the street that runs along this wooded area right next to the cemetery is being developed. I mean, there are houses now all the way along that road. But another quick question for you, I think it may be quick, is that in the late 90s, when they were putting the roads in Old Town, they found an Indian woman's grave, and they dated her back, I think, like, I believe I'm right in saying 2,500 or more years before Christ. And apparently they removed the skeleton and took it down to be examined. And then they were going to replace it in a close proximity. Now the question really is, if there was that one grave there, do you think there were others?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think those who've been to crypt know when you think you found your boundary, you haven't. And that there's an individual there. I remember the excavations that were done over that area. Almost all the forms over there say have the potential for human remains. So I think it's a known area, and we try and communicate that with people who are checking the site file. But
do you know if the Indian tribes, their encampment, did they very close to that, or was it further away? And the reason I say that is because the property that we're on now has had fire pits. The previous owner had the North Florida University come up and remove those pieces. And I mean, I just wonder if there are any graves close by.
I mean, thousands of years, yeah. I mean, and it depends by what time period. You know, Glenn Doran, who did the excavations at Wendover, he was saying, guess how many ponds with the same attributes as the Wendover pond have been tested? Like, none. Like, we just haven't been able to survey or keep ahead. And I think that's the one thing about water, but for land particularly also. And you can't put it back. You know, we teach kids it's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with nice, neat layers. And when I drove in and seeing those huge areas cut off, it's like you put your peanut butter and jelly sandwich in a blender. You can't put it back. So, you know, there are some gaps in our knowledge that we're just never going to know because they were removed in different times. And another thing that came to mind, I mean, you guys can help. You can help go out to some of these sites in Nassau County and other counties. And I'm really afraid of what I don't know about the St. Mary's River and on both sides. And I can't get access to those. So if you guys know of anyone or have any leads, because our dots get real thin along the St. Mary's, and knowing the industries that were here and the way this area of Florida was settled, it's just not true. So getting to find those would be a really difficult thing. Okay?
What do we know about the burial rites and practices of the various communities that we know did exist in this area?
I don't know. I mean, some of it is my own research limit. Like, I do historic cemeteries for the most part, those that are European colonial cities. I do, what's the other thing I was going to say? So some of the, because you're asking about their burial traditions and customs.
Yeah.
Indigenous people.
I mean, I don't know so much about that. I think the best information we have is using ethnographic data. I would be real cautious about any Spanish recording of those activities. I'll be real curious when your Timucuan speaker comes, because I think I've seen him speak before, and he's really great, but it's like a whole nother language. I don't think you could possibly capture what some of those burial rites were like if they weren't also in their own language.
But what I'm thinking is, taking the Gullah Geechee for, as an example, presumably the traditions of burial and the treatment of the immediately dead, those practices probably don't change very much.
I mean, we
I can answer that.
What does not change is that we honor our dead.
Yeah.
And we expect that when we put them in consecrated and hallowed ground that they'll stay there until we meet them in heaven. And we don't expect developers to come and disregard where we're laid to rest. That's a burial custom and practice that you can trace all the way back to Africa.
Yeah, we were having a conversation about the recent activity that was enjoyed in Mossbello and how great it was to see people, was that Mossbello, the interpreters and but we have that access in our community where other people do not and cannot enjoy those kind of activities. So I guess that's part of the heavy loss I feel are for the communities that don't have the similar right to access. Because I think you were asking about indigenous, but then Gullah Geechee would also make it more historic. So I thought that was a moving timeline of practices. But I tell you,
what I'm saying is that each religion, each community has its own particular practices
well,
about sort of how quickly to bury the dead, and perhaps where to bury the dead, and how the corpses should be treated. And perhaps that can provide some sort of
I wonder, a good analogy, just to pull away from cemeteries for a minute, is, as much craft beer as we have in America right now, we do still not have the diversity of craft beer that we had 200 years ago. And I would say the diversity of cultures and practices, even how many people we have, we'll ask questions like, why are these walls painted white? You know, and we'll get very different answers from the communities that we're talking with, because they do it for different reasons. And sometimes they do it just because their parents told them to do it. So I think we are just missing a lot of those stories and a lot of that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One
Thank
more.